Social media policy and practice, and we have talking to us today and leading this Tracy Beaker. Tracy, our
Good
Director of
afternoon.
Communications.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Happy holidays. Just real quick, I want to thank Joe Binswanger and Art Hardy for being here today as well with regards to policy and what we've done previously. Also, I wanted to make sure that everyone has had an opportunity to meet with Tori Ewald. Tori is our new social media strategist, and she's phenomenal, and we're so excited that she's part of the communications team. But this is Tori for those of you who may not necessarily have had an opportunity to meet with her. But today's topic is going to be about social media, and specifically it's going to really be about converting from one-way dialogue to two-way conversations on social media. I think that there's a lot of value and benefit with regards to moving in that particular direction, and Tori's going to give you guys a little bit more detail, some examples of what other school districts and companies are doing with regards to two-way conversation. But for us, it's really, really important that we have dialogue with our community, that we specifically be able to hear feedback from them, get their comments, their insights, their concerns, and learn from them and be able to serve in a customer service role. And that's one of the 4 tenets of social media, really, is listening. What is the community saying? How are they saying it? How can we be more supportive of their efforts in particular? So that's one of the things that we definitely want to focus on, and having two-way conversations allows us to be able to do that. Some of the other 3 tenets that we really focus on is informing our public, and right now we do that very well. However, once we've informed our public, we don't have an opportunity to really engage even further, and engagement is certainly the 3rd tenet that we try to do. And then lastly, we try to really inspire our audiences and our communities on social media. Some of the content that we've been putting forth in terms of our video comments and what the schools are doing has been wonderful, wonderful comments and content, but we don't have an opportunity to be able to listen to our communities, to hear what they have to say in terms of those particular events. So obviously moving from a one-way informative conversation to two-way dialogue allows us to be able to do that. Over the course of the last several months that we really have concentrated a lot on social media, Tori's done a phenomenal job, Katie Ellis as well on the content side, and because of that, we've seen our numbers increase. We have more followers today than we've ever had before, and it constantly increases every single month by 2, 3, 4, 5%. Not to mention the fact that from a content perspective, people are still really interested in watching what we put out there. On our YouTube channel, for the education channel as an example, YouTube, we have over 457,000 people who have viewed a piece of content from the school district. That tells us that the content that we're putting out there is engaging, it's informative, it's something that people want to hear and participate in. But at the same time, we want to now start having a dialogue and a discussion about those points as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tori, who's going to walk you through some of the presentation materials that we had sent back in September and again today, and give you some detail and information regarding what other school districts and other folks are doing to help us move in that direction.
Hi, how are y'all? Good. I'm so happy to be here today, and I have been looking forward to this. I know we were on the agenda in a previous workshop, and we have a couple other lovely presentations go over a bit, so we are here today, and I am super excited. So thank you very much for allowing us to be here today. And so I am Tori. It's nice. I think I've met all of you, and it's good to see you again. So we're here to talk about our two-way conversation on social media. Social media is where our community and our audience is at, and right now we are doing ourselves a bit of a disservice by only having that one-way dialogue, because while we are filtering out the bad, we are also filtering out the good, and there is so much good out there that we can't see and that we're not able to share with our community members and our followers on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter because they're being filtered out for our current school board policy. So right now we're pushing those messages out, and people are trying to engage with us, but unfortunately they're hitting a bit of a wall. So while our numbers have been increasing, which is great, we have an opportunity here to really beef up the efforts and increase those followers and that engagement even more by opening up that dialogue opportunity. So I know a big initiative of the school district this year is providing top-notch customer service. And that is where it's at, is on social media. When there is an issue or when there is good feedback or negative feedback or an opportunity for areas of improvement, people are going to social media to say what they want to say. And they're expecting people to listen and to acknowledge and to respond. So in the communications department, we are all about listening and informing and engaging and inspiring. And while we have been able to do that successfully with our one-way communication, it can really take off if we open that up to two-way dialogue. So right now we have several schools testing two-way conversation, and you did receive the lengthy presentation prior to the school board meeting, but we put a shorter version up at the front for the public, and you may have grabbed them on your way in. So in the shorter presentation, we featured Booker High and Toledo Blade, just kind of an honorable mention for two schools that are really rocking and rolling when it comes to testing two-way conversation. They're getting really creative with it. They're engaging their audience. They're putting out content that is interesting, that is inspiring people, that is making them want to engage and making them want to learn more about us. And so if you have the opportunity to go through Booker High or Toledo Blade's Facebook page, I highly recommend it because they are really doing some interesting things over there.
Yeah, and the numbers really show that too. In terms of the number of people that are now following them, especially Booker High School, they've got a team really strongly dedicated with regards to content and with regards to answering people's questions online. And their numbers are just through the roof in terms of not only new followers that are now interested in learning what they have to say, but also people that are enjoying their content and lending comment and having visibility. So that transparency factor in terms of what they're doing is really, really high right now, and they're starting to see that the benefits of that just because all of their numbers and engagement is really, really high at this point.
Yeah, and it's great. And increasing numbers is great, but I love the fact that we will be instilling transparency. And when we instill that transparency, we really improve the perception of the school district overall, which I think is just a huge opportunity. This is the platform that our people are at, and we want to make sure that they feel that we are being open and transparent and that they know what's going on with Sarasota County School District. So I wanted to give a great example that I came across the other day. I was looking through Home Depot's Facebook page trying to get some ideas of what good customer service looks like. So they had a customer who ordered new carpet to be installed in their house. So they got this beautiful new carpet put in all of their bedrooms and all of their living rooms and everywhere. And right when the job was done, they had one of the Home Depot workers come back through the house, and he left a muddy footprint trail through over the brand new, beautiful carpet. So of course, back before social media, it would typically be a phone call to the manager saying, hey, this is what happened. But instead, now they're taking a picture, they're posting it on Home Depot's wall, and they say, hey, what the heck is going on with your worker here? Look what they did to my brand new carpet that they just installed. So what does Home Depot do? They say, oh my goodness, we obviously always want to provide top-notch service and products and installation and personnel. This is clearly not the quality service that we are expected to put out. So please contact manager such and such at this phone number so we can follow up with you directly. So that customer, they have now been acknowledged, and they go, wow, way to go, Home Depot. I will follow up with you. And that other people that are online, they are seeing that interaction and they're seeing that conversation, and they're having that wow moment, which really which really provides a positive brand experience, which is what we are all about, trying to create those wow and positive brand experiences online. So again, the communications department is here to listen and to inform and to engage and to inspire, and that is why we would like you to consider two-way conversation as an updated school board social media policy.
We wanted to open it up and answer any specific questions that you have, and then through that, obviously, continue our dialogue, our two-way dialogue.
Shirley? Red button in the front. There you go.
I have questions. What about inappropriate comments? You know, words that start with certain letters, or that ID a child, or that start harping on a staff. I mean, that might tend to be bullying. What about those? I mean, are we going to edit, delete, or hide those comments? Or?
Sure, then it's sort of a two-pronged approach. The first one is, per our policy and our guidelines, we really don't allow profanity. So anytime that you use profanity, there'll be messaging up on that Facebook page as an example that says, please, again, be respectful of others, so that if by chance someone does use profanity, we have the ability at that point in time to filter out that comment because it's not appropriate for the school district. So certainly, again, again, the more that we can be transparent up front to say no profanity is allowed here, if someone uses it, we have the ability then to filter that out. The second thing with regards to things like cyberbullying, one of the things that Tori and her new role here has been able to find is instances of when that takes place at school. So in addition to us being able to just sort of monitor what's happening and what's going on, we can actually go to a principal and say, hey, we happen to notice this one student is bullying either one additional student or multiple students or things like that, and give them some guidelines and suggestions in terms of how to have a conversation with that student or that group of students, again, to make sure that they're adhering to social media policy. And then from time to time, we're going to have to send out messages and reminders regarding what those guidelines are, what that policy looks like, and again, just reminders to be more civil with regards to digital and social media use.
Thank you.
Bridget?
Okay, there we go. Sorry, I had to check my mic. Well, first of all, I'm very excited, so I'm sure that's no surprise. But a couple questions is it kind of hinging off what Shirley had mentioned is because we are subject to public records, we have to fall under a very different practice, I'm assuming. So when there are circumstances where there's someone utilizing abusive language, and as we have that, if we have that explicitly laid out, I think this may be more of a question to the attorney, but if that's explicitly outlined, do we have the ability to block, ban, et cetera?
Well, I assume that we have the ability to, because right now we're blocking basically everything by using a long list of common words.
Right.
So if we change and move in this direction, we can have a much shorter list of profane words that would block.
But from a public records request perspective,
we're archiving everything.
We have to archive everything regardless.
We archive everything regardless. We do currently right now, and we certainly would continue that practice as well through a company called Archive Social. And they monitor all of our social media channels and make sure that we have those records in perpetuity.
That was my second question. So I just want to make sure we're doing that. And then second, or third, I guess, is as we move out to different schools utilizing this, who runs point on it at the school level?
The social media designees vary school by school. Sometimes it's an AP or an AA. Sometimes it's a team effort between a media teacher or the yearbook designee because they're already out there taking pictures.
Okay.
So it's a varying effort. I would typically say it falls within your APs and your AAs.
And are they seeing with the level of engagement, which is great, because I think the transparent component is excellent, and I think there's always an opportunity when there's a complaint. However, I want to are they seeing more families engaged in a beneficial, like are the administrators really seeing this as a positive?
Yes, Micah over at Booker High School is phenomenal. She understands social media. She understands the ways in which her students engage in that particular platform as well. And she understands what that school community and dynamic looks like. So based on that, they really formulate a lot of their content specifically to making sure that, again, from a positive brand experience, Booker High School is going to be viewed in that realm. And certainly some of the guidelines that if by chance we are able to move to a two-way dialogue with the district as a whole, we would then be asking all of our official Facebook and social media pages to also follow suit. And with that, there'll be new guidelines, new points, and things like that for people to be able to learn. Tori and I will certainly be able to go out into the schools and be able to help from a tutorial perspective to get people to understand the best practices and the best use of social media. We understand it's scary for a lot of principals and assistant principals to kind of consider the fact that you've got parents who may not always be happy, and that certainly is going to happen. But the more that we feel that we can respond to them and do so in an appropriate way, in a way that, again, acknowledges them, that helps give them this level of service that they're asking and looking for, the more that we feel, again, we can possibly change some of those negatives into a positive experience.
And we are not having students who are point people at these various schools, correct?
That is correct.
Because I would think that would be a problem.
And there might be student-created content, but that content all goes through the social
Correct.
media designee before
Yes.
landing on any of the platforms.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Dr. Bowden?
So I just want to follow up, is that much of our conversation surrounds our Facebook page. When content is developed, but it's not put on our page, it's on someone else's page, be it a third party or an individual, what is our role and responsibility there?
Do you want me to tackle that? Sure, it's again multifaceted. If, as an example, we're putting forth the fact that Booker High School is getting ready to do a new musical, they have backstage, behind the scenes on their Facebook page right now, as an example. We can help support and share some of their content as well. If it happens to be the Gulf Coast Community Foundation based here in Venice, one of the things that we obviously want to do is lift up our partners. So if they're talking about the Civility Squad, we want to make sure that we're there to support them also. So our role is kind of dual-fold in that we're here to lend support. We also want to help amplify their message to our audience as well, being able to, again, increase the number of people who can see that message and promote things in a positive way.
Caroline?
I think it's great. It's going to help me be able to follow what's happening in the schools, because right now I'm scurrying all the time trying to find out what school's having a play, where's the musical, what's happening at Riverview, what's happening at Booker. I mean, this will be great, and we can support them, which is something that I've always wanted to do, and I just didn't know how to do it except from the dais. But this will be even better because it'll be out there in social media and everyone can pick it up. I think that should increase the number of participants that come to see the shows. If the people just understand how well done our media, our plays and musicals are in the schools, it's like sometimes like going to a Broadway show. So I just think this whole thing is absolutely phenomenal. And maybe you'll be able to answer the questions before I get them then.
That would be good. That's our role, Caroline, absolutely. But more importantly also, if you take a look at if we have, let's just say on the school safety side, we have a limited lockdown at one of our schools in particular. We can not only inform the public that that limited lockdown is taking place, but if by chance parents have questions throughout the time in which that's being investigated, we can keep them up to date with minute by minute information. And I think that's really, really important to, again, be able to help quell whatever fears or concerns that parent has when they hear that their child's school is in limited lockdown. So obviously we want to be able to use it not only to promote some of the great things that are going on in our schools and throughout the district, but obviously to inform the public whenever we have emergencies like that as an example as well. We feel we kind of have an obligation to be able to do that and to answer any specific questions that parents may have.
Any other questions?
So clearly, Tori and I are proponents of moving forward to a two-way discussion, and if you guys are agreeable to that, we can certainly work with Art Hardy and be able to draft new policy language that can then hopefully be adopted early next year with regards to moving in that direction. We feel that with Tori, especially being here, being on social media 24/7, we have someone here who's really designated to monitor and see what's taking place in the social media sphere. In addition, Tori's been phenomenal in terms of bringing those schools that have been concerned about even dabbling in social media, bringing them on board, making them feel confident and comfortable in terms of how they're using social media. And I think that's going to continue to grow as we have even more conversations with them and help support their efforts in this medium. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
I know that there are multiple Facebook pages and so forth from some schools. And I was just at Inglewood Elementary this morning talking to the PTA group, and they have their own separate Facebook page. And of course, they're our only school that is really part of the PTA organization statewide. And they were asking me if I would, participate, make sure I liked and followed that page. So we're looking at really including all of the different aspects of a school, not just one page, but we're looking at really ratcheting up and making sure that we oversee all of the different aspects of the school.
I think from an official school district page, whether that happens to be Venice High School or whether it happens to be a science teacher who has an unofficial Venice High School page, we certainly would be focusing on ensuring that all of the official pages are certainly being able to adopt this two-way conversation. And then we can certainly share best practices with all the other affiliated pages as well, people like the PTA and PTO groups in particular, to make sure that we're sharing with them what our best practices are. Maybe they have an opportunity to have conversations in the same way as well. In fact, many of them already do. And then again, ways in which we can help support their efforts also. Because we do retweet and we do certainly share things that they're posting also.
So what is the next step?
I believe the next step is for you all to determine whether or not you want to consider two-way dialogue, and if so, then we will ask Mr. Hardy to go ahead and draft new policy language accordingly. And over the course of the next few weeks, Tori will be putting together kind of a new list of guidelines in terms of how that works, as well as best practices for our principals, assistant principals, and those folks that are really managing those social media pages, so that we can go into the schools if they've got questions, we can help support them, we can educate as well, and hopefully get them on board where they feel really, really confident and comfortable as well.
Shirley?
I think when we're looking at guidelines for best practices, we also might want to look at guidelines for best practices for board members, about being sure we don't comment about anything that's coming up before the board. And it's kind of hard to know whether something, I mean, we'll know when we've got an agenda item or if something's coming up. But I suppose if it's out there on social media, I mean, there's the sunshine law, it's out there, but there are some things I would think that we're not supposed to be commenting on, and we just have to be careful. And I know you can go down a rat hole when you start commenting with some people.
Certainly, and exactly, and obviously, since this policy was reconfigured a couple of years ago, social media changes every single day, and with that, we can certainly work with you to be able to adopt a specific set of guidelines that you all need to adhere to as well, and or be thinking about the next time that you go to retweet something or certainly post something to Facebook. But obviously, from a school district perspective, we want to make sure that we're creating as much of a positive user experience as we can.
Yeah, I would like to also maybe somehow put a link to that when we here's our media page, but these are our guidelines, and this is not acceptable, or this, so that the public knows where we're at too, that yeah, board members aren't going to be on here commenting all the time. We can't possibly be following everybody's, but just because of who we are, we're not supposed to be commenting all the time. So they know that we're not going to be there following all of that, and that's not the way to talk to board members, is through social media. I mean, that they should send us emails. I mean, that's not the expected way to communicate.
And we can certainly put all of that in.
Or if they have a specific problem, it's not the way to communicate on Facebook.
Yep,
I mean,
we can
because I've just seen that. I mean, even on the Sarasota Herald Tribune page, I mean, people start talking about problems, and I'm like, this isn't the place to solve that, social media.
Well, we'll definitely partner with you all to make sure that the language that's in the guidelines that get revised is appropriate, and that you guys certainly want us to work towards those means. Absolutely.
Caroline?
I think it behooves us to be extremely careful of what we comment on in social media, as Shirley was saying, because it's very easy to hit like and whatever, and we just can't do it. And maybe if we could have a disclaimer out there with this social media that says that board members will not comment on something that might appear as a board agenda item. Because my understanding is that we're not supposed to tell anybody how we're going to vote until the issue comes up before the board. And then at that point we vote, and then how we feel, where we're going. Otherwise, we're not supposed to do that. So I really want us to be really clear on that.
Absolutely. And again, when we talk about transparency, the more that we can be transparent up front by putting disclaimers and things like that, not only in a guideline, but possibly also on a Facebook profile up on the left nav bar as an example. We want to make sure that we are managing people's expectations all throughout their experience with the school district. So that's a good point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hardy?
I think there are a couple of things that are raised by the recent comments. One is board members commenting. Certainly, if you are dealing with a quasi-judicial matter, an expulsion, a termination, things like that, then board members should not be commenting in any forum about coming to a conclusion, because, of course, you do not come to a conclusion until you've evaluated all the evidence in front of you. On other types of matters, we'll call them more routine board business, contracts or policies or such, you certainly can, if you wish, tell somebody your views on things. What you can't do is have communications between and among the five of you. And emails or social media is all a way that could happen, perhaps even unintentionally. So board members are going to have to be careful. you know, that you're not interacting with each other, or even if not doing it directly, indirectly, someone shouldn't ask the question on social media, I'd like to hear from the 5 board members, are you for or against this? And then to get into for board members to get into that kind of dialogue. So that's not a negative on two-way communication, but it's something that the 5 of you need to be cognizant of and concerned about. And just make sure you don't do that. Which is why group emails are always problematic.
Anything else? That's it?
Thank you very much.
Thank
We
you very
appreciate
much.
it.
Appreciate
Good job,
it.
Joe.
Yeah, great job, Joe.
You made it look easy.
It's good prep work.
We do have a question for you, Joe.
Just a second for technical.
Okay, next we're going to talk about the Venice High School planning issues. And we have Kathy Eba, Director of Long Range Planning, with us today to talk about that. I just want to say that Kathy has been working feverishly on her capstone project, which she's just finishing up and graduating shortly, and we're really proud of her hard work because she'll have a master's degree, and we love her, and we think she's doing a great job for us.
Another master's degree.
So
My husband is quite ready for both of them to be behind me and done forever. He overheard somebody mentioning, you should get your PhD. And all I heard from the phone was, ugh.
yeah, didn't I say something about that once? And you're
Yeah,
like, no, I don't think so.
If there's a PhD, it's definitely going to take a break, or else my marriage will take a break.
Okay, so we're happy to talk about this because I know that you all have done extensive work in the community.
Yes, we have. I'm just waiting for my PowerPoint to come up.
We did not have any documentation ahead of time for this
No.
particular presentation. I'll just
No,
mention
but
that.
I do have copies of the presentation if you want them for you.
Is it not reading it?
It's not, doesn't see it.
At least it's not
Not a big thick manual.
this is much more reasonable size.
Let me go back to it. I can get to it. I can see it.
Telling you my class.
I always do the redundant.
Cruising. Okay, Kathy?
Good afternoon. For the record, Kathy Eba, the Director of Planning, and with me is Diane Caminati. She's here today because the two of us have spent the better part of the last month going around the community and meeting with the community to talk about this issue as directed by the board, I think, in August. So we're excited to talk about what we've learned. So the things we want to talk about today is, one, the community issue is the demand growth of Venice High School. The challenge is meeting state requirements for additional capacity, and the opportunities are the planning scenarios that we have developed to address that growth. So the issue of a growing community is the growing community. The current capacity at Venice High School is 2,096. Their current enrollment is 2238, so it puts about 150 over capacity today. In our capital plan, we've had it there for a number of years, a 400 student station wing that can open within 5 years. We when we rebuilt Venice High School about 5 years ago, we built that school with the understanding that we would put this new wing in. So the core capacities, that is your cafeteria, your administrative offices, your gymnasiums, they were all built for that additional 400 student stations. We also even built the platform or the location that we would add that school wing at the time it was needed. The reason we didn't build it at the time is, as you know, the state only allows us to build to the capacity we have, not the capacity we're projecting for. So we couldn't have built it at the time, but we are able to upgrade the core facilities to address it.
So Kathy, can I ask you one question about that? So the capacity of the building was really 2,500, although
The capacity of the school
was 2,500. Although we didn't have that capacity. We didn't have that many students at the time.
Right.
So let's take Riverview for an example. Riverview's capacity is what, 2,800, 2,700?
It's,
26,
Yeah, it's actually, it's in our presentation. 2607.
And, okay, so any of those numbers really are not optimal, correct? I mean, if we talk now about Venice and what we would really like, we're not looking at, we don't think 2,500 is perhaps the optimum. So at Riverview, what do we have? We have how many students enrolled? 2607, right? So we're getting right up to the point of being there.
Right.
Okay, just trying to formulate that, because we can't build a school unless every seat in the whole county is filled up.
We're going to talk about that.
Okay.
So before you leave that, I think a discussion about, you use the term optimal in regards to what the optimal size of a high school.
Right.
You have to look at that from several different lenses. You know, the larger the high school, you actually drive down some of your costs. It's certainly more efficient to have a high school at 25 and 3,000. There's also some arguments to be made on the lower end that schools that are too small, you run into challenges having enough courses to offer. You have difficulty in some of your smaller schools offering AP courses, as an example, just because you don't have the density or enough students to take individual courses. And so there's certainly pressures on both ends. But if you were to say kind of what is the optimal size of a high school, I think there's plenty of research that indicates that number is right around 1,500 to 1,800. That's the sweet spot in regards to where are you efficient enough. I mean, every school, whether you have 600 kids or you have 3,000 kids, has a principal. And so whether you spread that cost over 500-600 kids or 3,000 kids, but then the issue of the master schedule. And so when you talk about, if you said what is the ideal size of a high school, I think 1,200 is kind of your lower limit. You run into issues without enough students to support athletics and bands and AP and have a diverse curriculum. And then when you get into the 2,500, that's a lot to ask of a principal to have an individual connection, to get to know their students and do that interaction. You start to see larger guidance staffs, larger administrative staffs, larger instructional staffs, and it really gets to the point when you can find schools in our country that are approaching 4,000, and that's a different job for that principal than a school in that 1,500 to 1,800 range.
So, and that's really the gist of what your decision is going to be, but I want to give you a little more background on where we are today. The map that is in front of you is a map that Diane developed. And what it is you read it just like you read a weather map. So the hotter the color, the more capacity or the more students you have in that area. And we would expect exactly where the students are, that they're in the kind of core area of Venice, Stony Brook, Laurel, Nokomis, Osprey, and then there's some
I
outlier.
can't read where we are, where this map is. I can see 75.
Okay.
But what's that?
So to give you some orientation, this is 75. This is Stony Brook, where my arrow is on top of. That's Stony Brook. So this is River Road right here, right along the green, the outer edge green. That's
Right along Marco River.
That's River Road. This
Very
is
good.
Hence the name of the road.
This is right along the river.
Very good.
This is 681 here. This is 41. And then this is Englewood Road down here. And Jacaranda is right there, and Venice Avenue is right here. Does that help?
Yeah.
So again, we would expect exactly what this map shows, is that the core Venice, the most number of students at Venice High School are in the core of the Venice area, that you have a fairly strong area at Stony Brook, and then the Laurel Nokomis along 41 has a number of neighborhoods that have a significant number of students. And then the lighter blue color is that's where you have the least number kind of scattered here or there. And you can see that there's a fairly good scattering down south of Minnesota. Those are the pocket kids, which is districted to Lemon Bay. So where is growth happening? And this very much similar to the area, the map of where the hotter colors are, where the developing colors are. You've got the number of students the number of developments that are along River Road. Those are the West Villages neighborhoods. Then you've got the new Palmer Ranch neighborhoods. Anything that's south of Sarasota Parkway is Palmer Ranch districted to Venice. And then you've got some neighborhoods that are coming out. And there's only 2 there now, but there's a number more that are under development in various planning stages along the Laurel and Border roads. And then over here it shows you the student data from those, and this is currently the number of students that we're getting out of the West Villages. So you can see that while West Villages is a growing area, we're not getting a lot of students. We've got 431 students currently in the West Villages neighborhoods, and that's the Renaissance, Preserve, Grand Paradiso, Grand Palm, which isn't officially a West Village neighborhood, but they market them. Island Walk, and again Sarasota National, which isn't officially a West Villages neighborhood, but they market them as part of it.
But Kathy, the 2 older neighborhoods of those 5 are Grand Paradiso and Grand Palm, correct?
Yes, that's true. And Island Walk is also significant. I mean, that one's an older neighborhood, but it tends not to have the amenities that families look for, so we would expect that we don't get a lot of students from there, and we don't.
Can I?
Yeah.
Bridget?
Say older.
She meant that.
Meaning they've been
They're
around.
older as in
Not population.
No.
No,
as in they've been built. They were the first built.
they were built at the time of the recession.
Right. They were all.
So the
built-
Sarasota National, nobody's there.
Yeah.
Right.
They
But
were
these
all,
have-
so Grand Paradiso, Grand Palm, Island Walk, and Sarasota National, those were the first neighborhoods. Sarasota National was under a different name, but those were the first neighborhoods of these, the Renaissance and the Preserve.
Yeah. Right.
The old neighborhood is where we're at now, where they will be.
Yeah, that's true.
Where you live.
So
Well,
here's Venice High, the projected 5-year growth, and the 2022-23 data and the 23-24 data. The 22-23 data, that's your currently adopted projections. The 23-24, those are your draft projections for next year. They may change, but we wanted to give you a sense of how things are changing. So currently, Venice High is 7% over capacity. It's projected, in the current projections, it's projected to be 14% over capacity by 22. And in the draft projections, it's projected to go a little bit higher, 17% by 23. So the state challenges, this is where some of your questions have already started to take us. Those are our 5 comprehensive high schools. And these are the capacities of our 5 comprehensive high schools today. You can see that there's only one that's over capacity, and that's Venice. And that the other schools have quite a bit of capacity. Northport, Sarasota, and Booker all have about 20%. Riverview is right there at capacity. And then when you look at the 5-year projections, again, Venice is the only one that stays over capacity, and the others stay with significant numbers. Now, these numbers, if you look at the current draft projections, the Riverview projection gets close to that is closer to staying at capacity, and Sarasota's capacity doesn't go up by 30%. These are the ones that were adopted in your current capital plan. Yes.
Bridget?
Sorry, I don't want to go back and forth, but just for relevance, you mentioned the 5-year capital plan, and it has the capacities, and that's 22-23. And so we have Sarasota High, we're projecting that much of a low.
That's within the current capital plan. Okay. That's the current projections.
Okay.
Remember, projections are they're a model based on past trends, but that doesn't mean that's what's really gonna happen. It just means it's the past. And then I showed this map. I always tell Diane, of all the maps she's ever made, this is one of my favorites because I think it's so illustrative.
It's like corn candy.
Just imagine each of those little dots is a house, because that's what they all have the potential to be. That is 40,000 unbuilt platted lots that exist in the city of Northport. And then this area up here, you've got another between here, which is Woodlands, the Woodland DRI, and out here where there's the Athena's DRI. Those have another 20,000 lots. So all told in Northport, there's a capacity for another 60,000 homes that aren't built today. Will be built some, and how many of them, and what pace they get built, that's the biggest challenge with the platted lots community. Unlike a community like West Villages or the Palmer Ranch, where we get a phasing plan, we know when those homes are coming online. In Northport, those platted lots, they can pull a building permit today and start building tomorrow, and we really don't know that until we start seeing the data coming out in the community. So in terms of planning, it's a little bit of a challenge for us to really know how soon you can start seeing students out of those homes.
Caroline?
We have land for Northport.
We have,
So that's not-
so yeah, I'll go back and show, kind of point with my cursor. We
So
have
the
land.
problem
We
is-
have a land for a high school site where my cursor is, right in this area, right next to the Woodland Middle School. There's land for a high school and an elementary
So
school.
the problem is not there. The problem is.
No, it's just, what I was showing you was that Northport is projected to have, it has about 20% of its capacity that's available, so it's about 450 seats currently that are available in Northport. What I'm showing you is there's growth that is targeted to
Our
that.
challenge is to make sure that we have land for the other high schools, because we don't have that challenge in Northport.
No, we don't. We don't. We have land in Northport.
And we have elementary land, 2 elementary schools.
Yes, we have elementary, middle, and high school.
So it behooves us to look now to make sure that we have sufficient land to build the schools.
We are working on that.
Okay.
Very soon you'll be getting it. We're gonna have a discussion about land. I think it's either gonna be February or March. We're gonna have a discussion about property.
You read my mind. I've keyed my mic just to tell you that in February, one of the things I want to do is just take you through the land that we have in inventory. I still find out about property on an almost monthly basis that I'm not aware of. There's pockets here and there in land that, and so I think it's important as a board for us to sit and talk about the land we have in inventory. I would also like to do that in the context of not only school growth, but is there an opportunity to possibly do a public-private partnership for the benefit of our employees if we happen to have the one commodity that seems to just keep prices high. And so I do think there's some opportunity. So what I want to do in February is to lay out for you all of the land that we own that we currently don't have facilities on, and then talk about what our future school sites, what land might be surplus that we should go ahead and put back in the marketplace. And then is there the potential to maybe develop this land for the benefit of our employees, knowing that housing is a recurring theme when you talk about recruitment and retention. So that will be February.
So as we just laid out, we have one school that's over capacity for Venice, at Venice, and then we have other schools that have capacity. What the state says to us is we look to build new capacity, whether it's a single student station, we take a classroom and we split it in half, whether it's a new wing or whether it's a new school, any level of new capacity above what we have today. The state says we have to do some things. We have to look at district-wide capacity. We have to look at the capacity of the adjacent schools. We have to look at busing. We have to look at other available capacity, i.e. portables or schools like the SCF charter school that's opening this fall. It doesn't say that we have to use any of these tools, but we do have to, if we're not going to use them as a way to address capacity issues in a specific location, we need to explain why they don't work. So we have to at least evaluate them and determine whether or not they would be effective for us addressing overcapacity.
Eric?
2 things. The candy corn map, or what you call that. Although correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. These are the lots that are possible to build, but are probable because some of them you just can't build on. They're They have no infrastructure, they have no roads, they have no.
There's challenges in building them, but
Right,
I can tell you that
you couldn't literally build a house on all these lots, because some of these lots are just unbuildable. The other thing is when you talk about this capacity, when you talk to some of the principals, they believe their capacity is a number lower than their capacity that's being shown here.
Yes.
And so when you talk to the principals, they're like, I'm over capacity by this much, which is a higher number than the number that you present here.
Absolutely. If you ask Brandon today if he has room for 450 students, because I talked to him about this on multiple occasions, he thinks I'm crazy. But that is what the state tells us. Those numbers are not we don't generate our capacity numbers. The state generates our capacity numbers. So that's why the state tells us we have to evaluate all of these things, but then we could explain at North Fork High School, we don't have room for 450 students because ... So that's part of the exercise you work with the state. If you decide you want to build new capacity and by state standards it looks like we have capacity, that's part of the discussion you have to have with the state. But the state, those are not our numbers. We don't generate them. They come from the state.
Just like recently at Venice High, we had more students than we thought, and we didn't have enough rooms for all the teachers to have a room. And so we've really come up with some issues there, or trying to deal with some issues there. And it's not good if teachers, float all day and don't have their own room. So it's a real thing. Caroline?
Kathy, are you going to discuss the community meetings that you held?
Oh, before that goes through, I mean, I wanted to have that more about the capacity and the criteria. Did we finish all of that?
We did. But if you have other questions about it, you're welcome to answer them.
When we talk about that capacity at Venice, and one of the things we were talking about, I mean, or we're going to get into Venice more specifically. But I mean, what is the how have we built out for the cafeteria and all of that? I mean.
So the capacity at Venice was built to, as Ms. Goodwin mentioned, when we built that campus, we built it for a 2,500 student station school. We built 2,100 students and student stations. When we built that campus, we purposely upsized the core facilities so that they could be 2,500 students somewhere down the road. And for the last 3 years, we have had in our capital plan because we started to see the growth of Venice starting to click up and then it went over capacity, and now it continues to increase the number of students that's over capacity. We have it in our capital plan to build that wing. But when we had the meeting in October to adopt your capital improvement plan this year, you asked us to reevaluate whether you want to continue moving forward with that wing. We have a number of scenarios that includes that wing that we're going to talk about on how to address that growth. And that's what we're here for today as we get ready to bring forward a new capital improvement plan, whether or not you want to maintain the wing in the capital improvement plan or whether you'd like us to go into a different direction. Are there any other questions about that? So we did have a number of community meetings. We had one at every one of the schools in Venice. So we had one at Taylor Ranch, Garden, and Venice Elementary. We also had one at Venice Middle. Actually, we had 2 of them at Venice Middle because you wanted us to do one specifically with their teachers. We had one at Venice High School, and we had one at the Chamber of Commerce.
And Laurel Nokomis.
And Laurel Nokomis. At the school level, not at the chamber level, in chamber meetings, but at the school level, we asked them to participate in a survey for us. And these are the results of what your community has told us they're interested in pursuing or going down. Now, there are some other ideas that were presented at the chamber. Was one idea that was presented by some of the business community to redistrict the Palmer Ranch neighborhoods in the northern part of the district to Riverview, which would cause you to do some other redistricting in the northern part of the county. But generally speaking, the discussion's really focused on these answers. So the maximum size that the community would like to see a high school is less than 2,000, followed by the 2,000 to 2,250. The vast majority of the community said they would like to see a new school. They would like to not build the wing.
Yeah,
but they would rather have a new school.
you've got a greater than 2,000, and that was kind of throwing me, so you just have to turn that
Yeah,
thing
it's
around.
outdated. Sorry.
It doesn't take much to confuse me, but
97% does not want to wait for a new school. They want it yesterday. In fact, when they saw, these were the choices we gave them, 5 to 10. We had a number of people say, where's the less than 5? And now. And we said, well, we can't get you a school now, so we're being somewhat realistic here. But you can see the vast majority does not want to wait for school. And waiting greater than 15 years, which is what our projections are showing that we would need to do, they were not interested in waiting that long.
Bridget?
So for clarification, we have 59% want a school less than 2,000.
Yep.
97%, even though the school is now over 2,000, want that wing yesterday.
Yes,
So there's a little bit of conflict there, yeah?
yes.
Okay. That's what, and I guess my other question is,
No, they want the school yesterday. They don't want a wing. They want a new school. They want it yesterday. They don't want a wing. We gave them this, the question was, how long are you willing to wait for new capacity at a school or a wing? It wasn't, do you want a new school or a wing? It was, how long are you willing to wait for new capacity? So they want a new school and they want it yesterday.
and you explained to them, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You explained to them that to get a new school, they have to be that much over capacity?
Yes. That's where the willing to wait 15 years plus comes in, and they're not willing to do that. So you're right, Ms. Ziegler, that what they want and what is realistic is not necessarily one and the same.
And just to follow up, if you don't mind, is that we built the core facilities to sustain a 2,500
We did.
student enrollment. Did we do community outreach back then?
I don't know, I wasn't here.
Because I think that, I mean, while we get to the bigger conversation.
The majority of the outreach was whether it was on the island or not. I was involved with that. I do not remember too much about capacity. It was whether we built on the island, rebuilt on the island or not. That was the main thing. Was there any difference in community input from the chamber and from our school sites?
So we didn't have the electronic feature at the chamber, but from the answers that we got, I would say that most of them would have, if we had the answers, we probably would have been in line. Although, as I said, there were some in the business community that suggested an option that we had not presented, which was take the students from Palmer Ranch and redistrict them to Riverview, which then would cause some other redistricting to the north.
For ceasing school.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. The 97% throw me, so they want a new school.
They want a new school. That's where the new wing or new school, that's the choice. That was when they got to pick a choice, whether do they want a new wing or do they want a new school. 66% said they would like a new wing. 33% say they want a wing. 66% wants a new school, 33% wants a wing. The question about wait for a school or wing was really wait for capacity of any sort.
And so I guess my question then goes, and this may not have gotten this granular, but the 97% don't like a new school. Are they attending a new school? I mean, are they going to be?
So that's where the wait, the greater than 15 years, the three elementary schools are captured in that answer because they're the ones who
Are not willing.
would be affected by this most. So the elementary is not willing to wait. They are 88% are willing to wait more than 15 years, not 12% are not. When you looked at all of them, that would include the Laurel, Venice Middle and Venice High School. 69% of them are not willing to wait greater than 15 years, and only 34% are willing to wait 30.
And we do not have any information or comment or community input from our 4 charter schools in the area.
No, we did not.
Which are middle schools that are likely to feed into a high school, public high school.
So
No, we did
Can I
not.
jump in?
Yep, please.
So you're absolutely right in that there is a little bit of a conflict. With those folks that participated in the forums, the majority of them believed that Venice High School's capacity should be less than 2,000 students, even though the capacity is up to 2,500 that we are planning for. when asked whether or not they wanted a new school and or a new wing, the majority of them wanted a new school. They didn't want to wait for a new wing, or they didn't want to add the capacity to Venice High School. They believed a new school was the better option. Then when we started talking about tenure and how long it would take them to actually build the new school, for the most part, people wanted it today. They didn't want to wait 5 years. They certainly don't want to wait 15 years or 20 years. And again, that's in conflict because you have to wait for the enrollment to be there and the student numbers to be there before you're even given permission to build a school. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. And when we separated out all respondents versus those who had elementary age students, and those are the ones really are going to be the most impacted, for the most part, again, those parents wanted to see that new school, and they wanted to see the new school within 5 years be built. Even though we did go through and we did specifically say that you have to build it after they come, not before they get here, even though that was a conflict. So it's not unexpected in terms of what we got from folks, but for the most part, there is a little bit of conflict in terms of managing community expectations.
I did speak to State College last week, and they're eager to get their charter school started, but it will only be juniors next year, then go to seniors, and then be backfill for freshmen and sophomore. And they anticipate that when completed, the collegiate school would have about 500 students. That they're not thinking it would be larger than that. So that would have some impact one way or the other, but yes, Dr. Bowden.
So Bridget hit on a point, and I don't know that we responded to that part of the question, is that when you talk about new schools, there is this basic truth of that they want a smaller school, but they don't want their child to leave the school to make that happen. And so, and I think we need to acknowledge that. If they say, do you want a smaller Venice High School? Yes, you need to get some of these kids out of here, but not my child.
Right.
And so we're not even touching what does a boundary look like. But when you have a school, certainly with the tradition of a Venice High School, you will quickly come to a consensus of, we want this school to be smaller than 2,000, and I want you to craft a boundary at which we stay at Venice High School.
Right, which was my concern when we're having these conversations. I'm so pleased that we have input, but there are implications. We have an entire county we're looking at. We're gonna have district boundaries that, you know, we're not gonna check the box of everyone. So I hope that was transparent.
It was, and we said that. We had some people who said, well, where would you put that boundary? And we
Very much would change their answer.
And we said that this was not a discussion about boundaries. We did not address that issue.
Caroline?
I think I attended 4 of those sessions.
You did.
And it was,
You should be applauded for that.
but it was very obvious to me they wanted a new school.
Yes.
And they were willing to have portables as opposed to a new wing, have a school first. So they understood what you were saying.
Yeah, we had really good discussions. I don't think any of the meetings lasted anything less than an hour and a half. They were very thorough discussions.
But NIMBY comes to mind.
Well, there were ways we can work it. If you look at the map, there are ways we can work it.
Are there any other questions about the community input, or I will go into the scenarios that staff has presented? Yes, Mr. Robinson?
I'll wait.
Okay. I don't have.
It's the most logical thing.
There we go. There it is again. Okay. So here are 6 errant, and these, please don't think about these in a static number because they could feed to each other. We're presenting to you some different scenarios, but they're not isolated by themselves.
Do people in the audience have copies of this?
They're up on the screen.
Okay. You might want to move closer to the screens if you
Yeah, the numbers are.
don't have really great eyesight.
And there are copies in the back of the.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so scenario 1 is forego the wing, wait to build, and we did 1,100 student station based on conversations with Dr. Bowden. We said, what's the bare minimum that would get us to a school that we could then grow into a larger school. So we settled on 1,100 because that's what you could get to a very small high school. Redistrict the Englewood students back to Sarasota County. So that's your pocket students from south of Minnesota Beach Road that are currently districted to Lemon Bay High School. This brings those students back to
How many?
Currently, there's 200, so we don't know how many additional students they get every year, so we left it at a static 200. That number obviously will change year to year, but since we didn't have a methodology for changing it, we left it at the 200. The way that we did these scenarios is that the yellow color is the currently adopted projection numbers. The orange ones are the draft projections that, again, they're draft, they could change, but they would be the ones for this year. And then after 22-23 in the yellow, we did an escalation factor of 2.5% annual. And then after 23-24 in the orange, we did that same 2.5 escalation. And that's an average of what the previous 5 years had been. So that's how we got to 2.5% growth. So when you look at those numbers, the projection, and this is just projection with, based on a methodology based on finance and current growth rates, to get to an 1,100 student station based on the currently adopted numbers, you'd wait till 2033, 34. The draft projection numbers escalate that a little bit faster. Growth happens a little bit faster in that scenario. So you'd be in 2031, 2032 before you'd get to an 1,100 student station classroom school. So on either scenario, you're waiting quite a bit, which is what we talked about with the community. We tried to explain to them that it was going to be a long time. If they decided to forego the wing, it would be quite a while before you're going to address capacity. But as Ms. Zucker mentioned, the community was preferred adding portables and just letting capacity be over capacity so you get to that new school rather than build the wing and then continue to go over capacity at some point. So that's scenario one. The pros on this one is you do get to build the new school sooner than if you build the wing. It would allow us to provide for the West Villages development. We have started discussions with West Villages to identify where a high school site in the community would be located, and hope we'll bring that to you at some time in the next 12 months. It doesn't, and these next two come from our discussions with the communities. These were really the things that they were most concerned about. It doesn't permanently add to the capacity at Venice High School. So while they were okay with having portables grow on the campus and letting the campus get over capacity for a period of time, a new wing permanently adds that capacity. Portables are just there until you get to a new school. It also doesn't permanently worsen the traffic issues around Venice High School, which were very, very critical to the community. Probably the single most, if we had a survey as to what issues they were concerned about, traffic was way there up on top. And it does enable the Englewood zone students to be redistricted back to Sarasota High School or Sarasota County, which I know is an issue that you've been talking about for the 4 years I've been here. The cons on it is because we're adding capacity, we would need to get state approval. And our current projections don't call for a school within 13 to 15 years. So we're going to wait a while before we get to a new school. The community may not want to wait, but that's what we're going to have to. And it doesn't utilize the core capacity at Venice High School. When we built that campus, we upsized that core facilities and we spent money to do that. So we wouldn't be utilizing the core capacity that we constructed on that campus with the intention of building that wing. Scenario two, this is construct a multi-level school to open and redistrict the Englewood students back to Sarasota County. So when I say multi-level school, that's where we're adding in the capacity at Garden and Taylor to these scenarios because both of those campuses are over capacity today. So you could do some sort of multi-level school which serves both high school, middle school, and elementary school build it for one school, and then when there's enough high school students, you take them off that campus and build a separate high school. Dr. Bowden, you are welcome to help me articulate this one anytime you think I'm not explaining this well. The advantage to this is that we would be able to address, Garden has one of the largest number of portables on any campus in our district. So it would allow us to address the overcapacity that we've had at Garden and have had for quite a long time on that campus. It would allow us to address overcapacity at Taylor Ranch, which is just, right now they're at capacity, but they're continuing to grow. And it would allow us to address the high school capacity issues, all in the same school, and allow us to build a new school sooner than if you wait for just a high school or wait for just an elementary school. So the pros to this scenario are, it allows us to build a new school sooner. It allows us to provide for West Villages. We have a K-8 site in West Villages, and we've talked to them about a second K-8 site as well as the high school site. So we're talking to them about property right now, and it doesn't permanently add to the capacity at Venice High School like the wing does. It doesn't permanently worsen the traffic at Venice High School like a wing does. It enables the Englewood zone students both at the, if we were to do this, we could bring both back, the middle school and the high school students, because we could bring the middle school students back and put them either at Venice Middle or a multi-level school. And it addresses the capacity needs not only of the high school, but now this one allows us to address the elementaries. The cons are, again, we need to get state approval. We don't have specifications. We don't have a scenario for a K-8 site or a K-12 school. We do have a 212 school at Pineview, but we don't have this kind of school, so we would have to figure out how we're going to do that. That's K-8, not K-12. So we have a 212, that's at Pineview. There are. We just don't have one, but that doesn't mean we can't go and steal somebody else's. How would you provide for high school athletics is a question under this scenario. It would be a small high school. I lost my, we thought it would be a small high school, about 600 students. So those issues that Dr. Bowden had talked about earlier regarding high schools, about the number of programs and how you do programming at a small high school, that certainly is a challenge. And then again, this doesn't utilize the core capacity that we added at Venice High School for the purpose of a new wing. The next scenario, and you're welcome to ask me questions on these scenarios at any time while we're looking through them. The next scenario is build a wing and delay the redistricting of the Englewood students. This is the scenario that we've been functioning under for the last 4 years, that we are planning towards that wing. We're going to build that wing, and then if we continue to grow the campus, we will at some time build a high school. It would delay the high school, and it would allow us to build that capacity. The major con here is it doesn't provide for the community needs of growth and transportation. We also still would need to get state approval, and it would delay that high school at 1,100 students for about approximately 18 years. When we did this scenario out further, it came in around 18 at the earliest. Scenario 4, this one, now we're starting to get in scenarios that we don't necessarily, that we control more because we're using our own local funding sources. This scenario could be done either with scenario 1 or 2 or 3. Any way we build new capacity, we build it with district. This one is built as a new school, but you could do it with any of them. You would build a new school, build new capacity, but you're going to do it with district funds. We did some draft allocations of our capital improvement plan. Because we already have the money in there for the new wing, and we redistributed some other monies and other projects, we were able to get $500,000 by year 5. 50 million by year 5. Right? 50 million, I'm not a numbers girl. 50 million by year 5, but then we still need another 50 million. So
don't we use district funds for all of our schools? I mean, the state doesn't pay for it, or are you talking about not bonding? I mean, when you say district funds.
All right, so I was waiting for that question. I thought maybe we should pause between scenario 3 and 4. So when we talk about school construction, it's impossible to have that conversation without a conversation about state regulation of capital projects. The state claims purview over capital projects when done with the 1.5 mils for capital. Their position has changed. Matter of fact, it's changed in the last 6 months. You'll hear frequently referred to as the Champion memo came out about a year ago, at which the state claimed purview over all capital dollars to include donations, that says you can't build anything without state approval. They have since clarified their position. And so we do not have to go through the state regulatory process for local dollars. And local dollars are defined as those that are donated to the district, those that come to us from sales tax, and those that come to us from impact fees. From those funding sources, you do not have to deal with the state regulatory process. Okay. If you use the 1.5 mils, then it goes through the state purview.
$1.5 million comes from our local taxpayers.
That is correct. And all stay here locally, but the state claims purview over that funding source.
So the reason that this comes into play in terms of a planning consideration is that it means that those state scenario, the state criteria that you have to evaluate, if you're using a local funding sources, as just outlined by Dr. Bowden, you don't have to do those things. You can build when you want to. And we've used that in the past when we were building school like Atwater. So it has been, and we have used that caveat in the past.
Right. So additional points to consider is currently the sales tax revenue that we receive, which is 0.25%. It's part of a larger initiative spearheaded by the county. Mm-hmm. Currently, I believe it's 2021 that would be up for renewal at the earliest, that they would go back for renewal on that. So certainly it's hard to project a funding source that currently has an end date on it. And then any discussion regarding impact fee dollars, understand that there are some timing elements on impact fee dollars, is that those are time barred. And so the idea that you could let it accumulate until you get to this $100 million becomes extremely difficult on the impact fee, whereas sales tax dollars you could allow to accumulate.
The impact fees have to be spent within 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
Shirley?
How much do we get from that 0.25% sales tax on an annual basis? And could we bond that?
It's like 18 million?
I think so.
All right, I feel like I'm being told to steal third from our chief financial. 10, 5, 1.
17.
18.
That's what I said.
And can you bond against it? Can you bond against it?
Yes,
if it was renewed,
you
could
bond against it after it's renewed, but nobody is going to bond revenue past its expiration date. So
right.
If you want to bond past the expiration date, you have to wait until it's renewed.
And that's in 2023?
2021.
21.
Can you bond sales tax?
That's what she just...
Yes, that's what we're talking about.
Sorry, I thought you were talking about it.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think it is.
0.25%.
Bridget?
Yes.
Well, it's something for consideration that I don't know if we've ever done here, but is a bond referendum specified for capital beyond the sales tax? I know Miami-Dade does it all the time. You circumvent the weighting. A lot of other districts do it so that if you have community, and I know it's the entire county, so it's not just one area, but we're talking, a lot of these have multiple school implications, and so if these are 15+ year timelines and we foresee or have the community interest to go beyond it, we put it to the voters, and that would give us the flexibility, and I believe we would circumvent having authority through the state, am I correct?
Yes, so that additional revenue would be considered local revenue, so you would not be subject to the purview of the state. Typically, you'd want a package. It wouldn't just be for the construction of a school. You'd want a broader appeal. You'd say a Palmer Ranch Elementary School, maybe an elementary and a K-8 and a high school in the West Villages, and a number of other projects to broaden its appeal. But yes, that certainly is an option. You could certainly have that conversation in the context of the 1.5 mils versus the 2 mils. Historically, we have levied 2 mils for capital, and so you could certainly make an argument to locally reinstate the 0.5 mils that we lost during the 7-8 downturn. So yes, there's an argument to be had there.
Caroline?
Also, we have capacity, we have bonding capacity now, because we're just paying off 2 bonds.
But we're paying
Yes,
it with
but
the
you have to,
1.5.
Wait a
you have to
minute.
go back to the funding source. So we have bonding capacity within the 1.5 mils that we're
Yes.
currently authorized. But that 1.5 would be regulated by the state, and you would fall under their purview for approval. If you went with sales tax dollars, a local option tax, then you don't have to go through the state approval process of receiving authorization to build, which has become, quite honestly, problematic around the state to receive
So
that
they've
authorization.
changed it, because before we could do bond without a referendum.
You can still bond without a referendum on the 1.5 mils, but the revenue derived from that bond would be subject to state regulation.
The 1.5 they giveth and they taketh away, because it was 2 mils and now it's 1.5.
But Bridget's suggestion was different.
Yeah, it was purely what they do a lot in Miami-Dade.
Miami-Dade does a lot of them, actually, so, and it's to circumvent when you have demand growing scattered and you have community being frustrated, they have to weigh in, they're willing to pay for it, then we have some flexibility.
Hillsborough just passed one for transportation.
Right, well, that's the other thing, it's not, to Dr. Bowden's point, it's not exclusive to school X. I mean,
Right.
it has to be written on the ballot, but if there are transportation issues that we're trying to, work on, a number of other things, it's just something outside the box that we haven't done that we think consider, I think.
You could.
Shirley?
So, yeah, I just,
I want to just make one question.
It expires in 2024.
2024?
2021 is the earliest at which the county would go back and seek, you would not wait until 2024 to seek renewal of it. And then if you had a renewal in 2021, that would allow you to bond out for the full life. So that's with a 2021 date. But
Yeah, I
the
remember
funding
doing that
source
before.
itself, with no action on anyone's part, does go through 2024.
So if we
3?
do a bond referendum,
4.
I was given 4.
if we do a bond referendum, as you're suggesting, don't we have to wait till 2020 to put it on the ballot?
Yeah, if you have a special election, yeah.
Well, I'm gonna go for 2020. But I mean, and I think we need to work that out, but yeah, I that would be typically when it would be done.
Well, and certainly if you were today, which I'm not suggesting that you do, if you were to green light that course of action, you could still go through the planning phase of identifying land, purchasing the land, putting together what the package is. I mean, you wouldn't want to go probably any shorter than 2020 just to get it put together. But if you set down on that road, there are certainly actions that we would take immediately, which is to receive permission to move the money from a classroom wing at Venice High School and repurpose that for acquiring land for a site. And so there are certainly actions you could take immediately if that was a course of action you wanted to pursue.
To get you in the queue, and we really benefited from that with Booker High School in the rebuild when the money became available for during the recession, when that stimulus money became available. We were one of the few people ready for that in Florida, and as a result, really did very well with it. Shirley?
I just want to clarify then that you are talking about adding an additional, is it a half a mil or a quarter mil or whatever, to the property taxes?
I'm saying take it to the voters to
Right,
determine.
well, but I know, but that's something that we would take to the voters.
From a delay
Could basically, reinstate us back to the 2.0 mils where we used to be, but we'd have the voter approve that extra half a mil.
No.
Yeah.
The voters would have to approve
It
it.
would have to be voter approved.
It would have to be voter approved.
I am the one that suggested the capacity between 1.5 and 2. I believe Bridget said any local option tax. You could talk about, you could talk about sales tax, you could talk about property tax. I think her context is locally generated tax. For the record, I'm the one that put the 0.5 mils in place just historically because we've levied 2 for capital.
But from a timing standpoint, as we look at this, and I think there are a number of, I would say exclusively, I think there's some other things we have to, that are going to be excruciating and painful that we have to consider, just the redistricting component, but I would say if we are trying to look at these timelines and you also want to weigh what the community wants and says, and to me, I just want to say that that is an option that we haven't put on the
Well,
table.
yeah, well, I think when we put that option on the table too, we have to make sure that we're then using up our other dollars that the state has control over. Because when we go to build another high school, which we probably will at the North County with the new homes up there in Lakewood Ranch in 20 years? I mean, we'll still have that under capacity according to the state. So, I mean, I don't know. We have to project this out to see where it takes us.
When we do this, do we have to, wait a minute, if we, about my question.
This is there. So there's still
Do
some
we
other
have to
options.
redistrict? Do we still have to redistrict?
Yeah, no.
I
So
didn't think we did.
If we build a new school, we don't have to redistrict?
Not if we.
Well, yes, of course you have to redistrict. I thought you were saying if you have to look at redistricting and as an option if you use your local revenue.
If we use the local, we have to.
You look at if you use your local revenues. I mean, you build a new school, you're redistricting. You're going to redistrict. That's a given. And I think most people would say probably the easiest time to redistrict any school is when you're building a new school because there's a understandable reason why you're doing it. For most of the public, but you don't have that scenario, that list of criteria that you have to look at, the busing, the redistricting, the capacity issues. If you're using your own local resources, you don't have to do that in order to get permission to build the school. If that's what you're asking.
That's what I was asking.
Yes, you don't have to you'd have to do them, but you don't have to do them in order to get permission from the state. You decide to build the school and then you have a whole lot of other things that have to be done just because they have to be done.
Is there also a way that we can look at what the state considers the capacity at these schools and somehow reduce that, saying, well, we really don't want schools that have a capacity over 2,500 or 2,000 for high schools. We want to take down our capacity. So is there anything we can do
You want me to take that
to
one?
reduce?
No, I got it. So we are looking at our schools, and actually the reason I said Brandon laughs at me when I tell him how much capacity, that he has room for 450 students, he laughs at me, is because he truly does not believe he has capacity for 450 students. So we are getting ready to do a refresh on that campus. Believe it or not, it's almost 20 years old. So we're getting ready to redo, and we at the same time we are looking at the school and figuring out, are there ways that we can reduce some of those students? Now, are you going to get rid of 450 students? No, you're not. But we're trying to do it some, and we are doing that across the district at various schools. We're looking at.
You're not getting rid of the students, you're just getting rid of the capacity.
Yes, we are looking at it, but it's not easy to do because the state requirements for capacity are formula driven, and there's some flexibility there, but it's not significant.
And when you talk, Brandon, you're talking Northport High School.
I'm talking Northport High School.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Any other ones? Okay, so that's scenario 4. Scenario 5 is very similar to scenario 4, only here we're doing what we call, this scenario does a P3 partnership, a private-public partnership. This has been done in some of the other districts. Other districts have looked at it and determined it's not the best option for them. The biggest challenge here is getting a partner who's willing to do this. So basically, it's similar to a lease to own. They build the property, then you start leasing. On paying lease payments on that property, and eventually you own it. The advantage of it is it doesn't count against state capacity numbers, so that issue about state capacity doesn't affect this option. The disadvantage is trying to find a partner. Dr. Bowden, you have any other on this one?
I think if you went seeking a partner, there are a number of entities that would like to enter into partnerships. I think you have to be very careful because there is a profit motive to those partnerships. And so as opposed to us straight bonding revenue versus entering into a partnership, they're essentially becoming the bonding entity and then with a profit capacity above and beyond it. But this option, I think, is a viable option. I don't think you would struggle to find partners that would be willing to do it.
What's the normal cap rate for these these type of projects.
I don't have that kind of experience to tell you.
Yeah, I would like to see how much it would cost us to do
mean,
that,
I
because
mean,
there is a
is it
profit,
over
but you're
10%?
paying interest too
No.
on the other one.
Yeah, I'd be very curious I'd be curious what the cap rate is versus our bonding rate. I mean, that's the question.
Right. And
Bridget?
Well, I mean, I think there are other districts who have done this, and I think, I don't want to speak out of turn because I haven't had any conversations with people, but I do believe that there are private organizations that would like to see that. I just don't know what that timeline looks like, because they're forecasting probably a little bit more beyond probably what we would be wanting to do. But, and you said something about the capacity. When we own it, it would not restrict us for the capacity to utilize it now. If we do this, but once we absorb and own it, now that adds to our permanent capacity.
Yes.
So I just
Right, but it's just, it addresses the concern that Ms. Zucker had about getting the state permission to build.
Right.
We don't have to
the
build.
capacity question is answered by you don't take title to the property until you have the head count, which justifies the stations. And so it's really not a capacity conversation.
Then the final scenario is, Ms. Ziegler, the redistricting, at least in this one, we're talking about redistricting to Northport specifically. We have 450 available student stations at Northport. This redistricts West Villages to Northport High School, maintains the Englewood pocket, and delays either a school or a wing opening at Venice. The cons to this are, when Diane and I went to meet with the community, we heard a number of families who expressly said to us, we moved here from Northport because we wanted to be districted to Venice. Now, how many parents that is, I'm not sure, but I think that there would be at least some concerns from parents who made that move into the West Villages area to be districted to Venice.
I will tell you, this is the Tallahassee option. If somebody, a disinterested third party, looked at the enrollment in our district,
Yep.
they would say, these are just student numbers. They don't have faces. They don't have families. It's just, what would you do if you let the numbers decide it? If somebody in the basement in Tallahassee said, what's the answer? It would be this option here.
And when the chamber, when the discussion at the chamber happened, there were families that talked about that the Palmer Ranch neighborhoods that are districted to Venice, by and large, those aren't built yet. So if you were going to look at Palmer Ranch and then consider redistricting at some point, that now would be the time to do that, because there are no parents to say anything about it. But I just wanted, and they asked me to make sure I shared that with you, so.
I want to point out two things. One, it's somewhat ironic, those people said they left. I was there when that lady said that. She said she left Northport to move to the Villages. That's still Northport. So that was a little ironic that she had said that. And two, the city of Northport City Commission advocates to having those divisions go to Northport High, because they believe that that's part of Northport, and they really want those people to realize that they're in Northport. So the Northport City Commission is also taking a stance that they want that to occur. So I agree. If you do any of these other scenarios, someone in Tallahassee is going to say, why are you not doing this scenario? And I don't know what the good answer is. It doesn't sound that odd that people in Northport go to Northport High.
Well, I'll tell you what the answer is. This is a temporary solution.
Yeah.
What's going to happen is
Yeah,
you would
you
move
kick it down
students
the
from the West Villages to Northport, and at a future date, you would move them back to a new school. So they'd get redistricted twice. Now, unlikely to affect the same student, certainly not the same family, because you'd be talking 15, 20 years apart, but this is a temporary solution.
But the problem is, a lot of those other scenarios require Venice High to endure a lot of pain that's not shared throughout the county. And so Venice High the problem only gets worse as time goes on, and those subdivisions get more and more built out, that Venice High gets to be more and more over capacity. You know, I mean, you can tell them there's built for 2,500, but if you do not want to get on Venice Avenue at 215. I mean, everybody knows, do not, between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock, don't drive on Venice Avenue. Don't drive on 41. Sorry, don't drive on 41, because all those kids are letting out, and the place is insane.
This is very clearly the scenario that we discussed earlier, which is send somebody else's child somewhere else.
Right.
That's right, NIMBY. Caroline?
What I would like to see is us to have the ability to build a high school and to build it with our own money, however we do it, and to build it within 5 years.
Well,
Is that possible?
the capacity, so the soonest school you can build is this one, the multi-level, because that's where you absorb capacity that exists at multiple grades. To build a high school, even with our own funds, you don't get to 1,100 students for, that's what this scenario talks about. You don't get to 1,100 students until
It's
25,
we consider
26.
it's very inefficient.
So absent a regulatory environment, if you said, what does true growth planning look like? You would actually draw the capacity of Venice High School below its current capacity so that when growth occurred within its new boundary, that it would come back up to its total. And so you wouldn't open up a new school and leave Venice High School at 2096. You would draw Venice High School down to 17 or 1,800 students, and as growth occurred in their boundary, they would come back up to that total. And then you would build a school and not open that new school at full capacity, but you would build that school so that growth would take it to its new number. So to answer your question, could that be accomplished in 5 years? I don't think that's the case. Could we break ground in 5 years and open in 7 to 8? Yes, I do.
But it would be, in order that, it would probably be a multi-level.
Right.
It would be a multi-level school. It wouldn't be just a high school.
So 6-year-olds and 18-year-olds on the same campus.
I'm not even sure that you
Yes.
would do it that way. You could draw down the capacity of Venice and Northport. If that's a scenario you wanted us to work on, I think that's where logic takes you. But what would happen is you wouldn't overcrowd a campus. To me, that's the flaw in the logical argument, which is you can't build a school until you have those students somewhere in inventory. So the idea that I can't build a high school in the West Villages until I can tell you where there's 1,200 kids over capacity, be they at Venice, Northport, Lemon Bay, or combination thereof, that's not planning. That is reaction. And so if you said, what would you do ideally, you would draw down the capacity and then move back up. You would never, in a natural environment, say, I'm going to put 1,200 extra kids on the campus of Venice High School. That defies logic.
Right.
Bridget?
So I want to go back to Venice. Can I go into, and
Yes.
I think
Is there
that,
a slide that you want me to take you to?
no, I
Okay.
think as we kind of, for me personally, on how this goes, because I think there's no question in the various growth components we knew we will have to build something at some point, timeframe wise, but for me, and that's why I asked the question, because the core facilities, we paid for them to be 2,500, but I understand that we may be abandoning that, and that caused me a little heartburn because I understand that it feels like it's overcrowded, and I do think, so that's why I want to be able to have the flexibility locally to base on what our local residents want. I think that's a really important part of that, is because if you go to slide 6 or whatever it was, that this is the Tallahassee version, they're far removed, I get that. So if we go any route that's beyond that, I like to have that flexibility just determined locally and approved locally. But I think that before you look at that, when we make those decisions of the 20, I mean, we go to, I think the first question was, what's an ideal and optimal, high school size? And so 2 things were said were efficiency and course offerings. My question, and this may be better directed to you or something you've come back to with, was, for me, it comes down to what's our academic success, what's that sweet spot, and that may be course offerings, but also the safety component. Is there a bigger issue with safety with Riverview, for example, because it's our largest high school? I mean, and to me, that would dictate what's the good spot, what's the right size for a school and a high school. Without that information, I feel like I don't know. I think we're just kind of, for me, throwing darts at a dartboard. And if we built it at 25 and we're abandoning that, I think is there capital loss at that point? Yes, but is the community willing to do it? And the other part is that conversation about, we are looking at, I don't want to redistrict it, put this on the record, I don't want to, but I also want to make sure that we do exhaust all the options, and I like that I appreciate the unique, there are different funding sources you put on here that I think are really important. I appreciate that. So, and I guess my final ramble here is, what is our timeline? What do you need from us based on a timeline? Like, with these options here.
We don't have, so we, as I said, the reason we're bringing this forward to you now is because we are getting ready to do our capital. As you know, we start that in the beginning of the year, beginning of the calendar year. And so right now we have a wing for Venice High School in the capital plan. Whether that stays there is the topic for discussion today. But that doesn't mean we have to have this. I mean, you know that we don't adopt the capital improvement plan until June. So we've got some time to think about some questions, and I've been jotting down some different follow-up that I've heard from the board. So we don't have to make a decision today. I think if you can give us some direction as to other things you want us to look at, we can certainly do that and move. If you have a direction for us, we're happy to take it, but it doesn't have to be.
Caroline?
One of the things we asked as a board is, what is the ideal capacity for high school? And I don't think that's come back to us.
1,500 to 1,800 students.
Okay.
And I've talked to Eric Jackson about this quite a bit at Venice High, and he really feels that being able to manage the student body at the rate that he has this year over last year's capacity is a big deal. And I think the things that are out there that we don't have a crystal ball and have the answers to are how many new families are going to come into the West Villages and other entities of South County once baseball is here, and other things that are going to get a lot of recognition regionally, if not nationally. I think I get calls from parents every year in right after Christmas about choosing their students into Venice High, it seems, from Northport. The inset area that we have 200 students, and again, I believe that I would help anyone in that area who pays Sarasota County taxes. There are some families that want to go to Charlotte who have a history with Charlotte County, and that's fine. But that whole impact of that area and the impact that we have with the collegiate school coming in to State College, those are some issues that we really don't have a good fix and a good handle on. But I think that we need to go forward. I would like to see us look at P3, because if we talk about workforce housing, which is lousy in this county, as we all know, we do have a lot of new teachers that cannot afford to live in Sarasota County. It just came out, last week, that this is one of the most expensive housing markets in the country. So I think we need to look at that one, and I think we need to look at how we would go forward in both.
Okay.
Okay, who had their hand up first? Dr. Bowden?
I just want to ask a clarifying question, and just kind of where I would like to get to today. Is there a desire on the board to continue with the planning of a 400 student classroom wing at Venice High School? Because,
that's where I'm going.
Right. And so if we got there today, that allows us to pivot, and there's a number of options. I don't see a huge desire to wait 15 to 20 years to build a high school between Venice and Northport, but as we continue to do our planning work, we should focus on how do you get a high school between Venice and Northport, and how do you do it quicker than 15 years?
Yes.
And so to continue on working with the developers of the West Villages on site identification, but not to put any more staff time into the planning and development of a 400 student classroom wing, and then to give Jody permission that as portables come onto the campus at Venice, that footprint is no longer off limits. One of the things that as we move portables on, I don't know where you would put portables for 1,200 students at Venice, and I certainly don't know where you would build a classroom wing and put those portables. And so we've kind of said to Jody, don't put the portables where the classroom wing might go, because then you're going to have to move them. And so if we can say the classroom wing's off the table, and you can start planning for where portables come in the inevitable.
And these will be leased portables, correct?
That way the capacity doesn't count. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Shirley?
Well, I agree, and I look at that scenario 6, the Tallahassee version, or what we would be required to do with our 1.5 mils. I mean, I had a great big no on that. So, and I don't want to see us continue to build schools for 2,500 or more students. I'd like to see us even take the schools we have down to 2,000 or under. when we're looking at building the schools. And I thought, you know, Bridget brought up a very good idea. Let's look at alternative ways of funding it. Either go out for bonding or that additional half mil or up to or whatever, or those P3 partnerships. I think we need to know more about them or how they might work. But one way or another, I would like to see us look at in a 5-year plan that let's start a school down there in however we have to do it. One way or another, I think we can come up with a plan and so they can move forward. But the building that wing doesn't sit well with me for 2 reasons. Because I don't want to see a school that big. And I just think it just kicks the can down the road again and makes it harder for us to build the school.
Caroline?
I was finished, but that's okay. But that, in doing this scenario we're talking about now, it's right in line with what the community wants. So we've heard the community and we'll listen.
Any other questions? Any other comments or statements?
Thank you.
Thank
We
you,
appreciate the direction today.
Happy holidays, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. Any other comments from our members before we adjourn our workshop? We're going to adjourn our workshop now, and we're going to have a swearing in of new Sarasota County Schools police officers at 2:30, and then we'll convene our regular board member meeting at 3.